Welcome, everybody. Terry Maxwell here. Today is one of those special days in my life when I get to speak to one of my heroes and idols in the entrepreneur space. To put those accolades into perspective, about 14 years ago, I had this brilliant idea to create a purposeful Shark Tank, and I was going to invest in purposeful ideas that made the world better. And I did, and I lost all of it. I lost all of it. And part of the reason why I lost all of it was because it is extremely difficult to value when a business is not yet a going concern and it's an idea. It's really hard to value it fairly. And so the net effect of that is either the person walked away from the business and I was left with nothing, or they thought that it was worth more than it was. And it was just one headache after another. So from that point on, which was about 2.5 years into this purposeful Shark Tank idea, I just said no more. I'm not going to do any collaborations, and I'm just going to fund my own things, and away you go. Well, that doesn't work either, because collaboration is really, I believe, where great ideas can be born. And about 3 years ago, some of my clients were really pushing me to create this new business, and they wanted to invest in it. And I just was very resistant. And then somebody handed me the book, Slicing Pie. And I knew I had found a path forward, a path to do really effective collaborations, and in a way to value the contributions of the people that I was collaborating with. So with that set up, I want to introduce Mike Moyer, who created this methodology, created the book, he created the pie slicer. I've created a very successful business using his methodology. I learned a lot from it. I've got 2 more now that are in our speculator fund that we will be launching in the next couple of years, also based on the slicing pie methodology. And for those of you that are not familiar with slicing pie, what it allows you to do is to value inputs. Inputs could be cash, they could be ideas, they could be connections. To value inputs at a consistent, with a consistent methodology throughout those early stages of creating something. And it's great for new industries that are popping up where you don't really have good benchmarks for valuations. It's great when you've got a variety of resources that are coming together to collaborate. And the rules are fair and consistent. So it's a pleasure. With that, Mike, I want to introduce you and let you take it away. And again, we're recording it for anybody that couldn't make it, but show your stuff, man. It's great.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for the nice introduction. I really appreciate it. I hope everyone can hear me just fine. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so I can get into the slide part of this, which is part of the share screen. Please ask the host to give me permission to record. Oops. Wrong button. Share screen. So you should see my screen now. So this is Slicing Pie. This is similar to the content you have on your online course for Slicing Pie. And I do want to thank you as well for being a supporter of Slicing Pie for the past few years. It's always nice to have some reference clients, and you're definitely a reference client. There's a number of reference clients. It's hard to follow a company all the way through their success with Slicing Pie, because most people don't find a book they like and read it and apply the knowledge, and then a few years later call the author and say what happened, especially when it comes to financing. That keeps their financing relatively quiet. So it's difficult for me to track success stories, although I know there's a lot of them anecdotally. Someone just sent me an article today. They raised $7 million in the back end of Slicing Pie. So I'm happy to see these success stories. And it does work. I've been doing this for about 10 years, and I have yet to see a company that fell apart because of Slicing Pie. I have yet to see someone who didn't get investment because of Slicing Pie. I have lots of stories, people who think they're successful because of Slicing Pie. So it's been wonderful to see this. And I'm always looking for opportunities like this one to share the methodology and answer questions and reach out to communities. So this program is entitled Perfect Equity Splits for Early Stage Bootstrap Startups. And what that means is this works for any company anywhere in the world that's a startup, early stage, and bootstrapped, meaning they're foregoing salary and investing their own money and their own time without getting compensated. If that's you, this will work. I absolutely promise it'll work, no matter what kind of company it is. It can be a product company or a tech company or a cannabis company or anything. I've seen it work all across all kinds of different countries and venues. And I even had someone do a prenuptial agreement using Slicify a few years ago. So it works all the time. The first deal we do with our co-founders is this equity deal. We decide how we're going to split up equity. And the basic rationale is your share should be equal to the value of your contribution over the total value of the firm, which is sort of the rational approach that people start with when they're thinking about equity splits. The problem is we don't know the value of your contribution. We don't know the value of the firm. In the beginning, when you're bootstrapping, it's worth zero. You're not worth anything. So it's impossible to do this equation. So what it winds up with is your promises divided by my dreams. So you'll promise that you're going to deliver customers or technology or great ideas. And I'll promise you that my dream is that we're going to be $1 billion company. So I tell you, I'll give you 0.01%. You're going to be rich beyond your wildest dreams. And it quickly becomes a ridiculous conversation where no one really gets what they're doing. And unfortunately, we start seeking advice from lawyers and advisors and people that are smart and successful and well-meaning. And they give us the same advice, which is, you know, what's your financial projections? What's a rule of thumb for someone in San Francisco? Or they're basically guessing. Every single equity split on the planet besides slicing pie is based on guesses and assumptions about future events, which you cannot possibly predict or understand. No matter how smart you are, no matter how much data you have even, we can't predict the future. I can't predict whether Apple computers are going to go up or down tomorrow. I can't predict it. And I have tons of data on them, 30 years of data on them, and thousands of people making decisions. We still can't tell what's going to happen tomorrow. So in a startup, it's so volatile and so unpredictable. There's no way we can possibly know what's going to happen. So what most people do is they do what's called a fixed equity split. They'll say, okay, we've predicted the future the best we can. And I predicted that you're going to do 40% of the work, I'm going to do 60% of the work, or I'm 60% valuable to the company, or you're 40%. Maybe it's my idea, or I had the thought or the brand idea. So I'm more important than you, for instance. Or maybe we're basically equals, but I want to maintain control. So I want 51% so I can make decisions, whatever those happen to be. So some variation of that. Most startups do fixed splits, and oftentimes they say, screw it, let's keep it simple. We'll go 50-50 right down the middle. And where we're split, the number of partners we have by thirds or whatever. The problem is with these splits, which are very, very common, is what happens if you do all the work? We're 50-50 and you do all the work, then I own half your company. Or what if I'm a marketing person and you're a technology person and we bring in another technology person? Well, that person's going to help you, not me. Does it come out of your share or my share? Or what if you want to quit? You get to keep your shares. What if I want to quit? All kinds of things can change. I was with a company, advising a company once where the CTO was hit by a bus and subsequently died of his injuries. It was a tragedy. And his wife inherited his half of the business. And the surviving founder said, does this mean I have to give her half my profits forever? And indeed it does. But she had no skills for being a CTO. She was a doctor and she didn't have any skills for that. And she didn't want to give up her share, and I don't blame her. But eventually that company went out of business because they had to hire a new CTO. And so the CEO shared his share and she had 50% for doing nothing. And they had 25% for doing everything. It just didn't make sense. The only thing that doesn't change about your company is the fact that it's always going to change. And then second something changes is one of these things will be true. The first one is we got this less than gator or greater than gator, which means that your share is greater than you deserve. Now, some people, lots of people actually are okay having more than they deserve. In fact, my butt was saved early in my career by getting more than I deserved. We all have these lost stories where we lost everything. I started a company in college and I sold it and I invested in the stock market and I did quite well. And then I got married, had a baby, bought a house, went back to graduate school and started a company. And I lost all my money that I'd made. And then I joined a new startup company and I got more than I deserved. And we sold less than a year later and I got more, I made all my money back. So that's a case where I had more than I deserved because I was only there for 9 months before I made money. So most people are sometimes okay with it, but no one's okay having less than they deserve. What I tell people about equity splits is they don't determine your success. They determine how you experience success. So I had a company exit this a couple of years ago where my co-founder bought my shares back for basically par value after 10 years of owning them because I wasn't with the company anymore, and sold them for potentially millions of dollars that rightfully should have been mine. But just because I agreed to it, just because my lawyer looked at it, just because I signed it, doesn't make it fair. We can't predict the future. So no matter what, if we agree to future events, we can't predict those things. So no one's comfortable having less than a fair share. I worked with a guy once who started a business with a partner, and they sold it several years later, and he made about $5 million, which is more money than he ever thought he'd make in his life. But he was irate because his partner made over $300 million. They'd done the same volume of work, but his partner made a hell of a lot more money than he did. So he was extremely successful. The way he experienced success was very disappointing and frustrating. So I call these alligator pit negotiations. You've got your less than gator, where people are getting less than they deserve, and the greater than gator, the people who have greater than they deserve. When you go into a fixed equity split, one of these things is going to happen. And so when you approach the equity split conversation with this understanding, your instinct is to get as much as you can deserve, to get in and out as fast as you can, to keep it as simple as possible. And your instincts are counter to a productive working relationship. I call this the fix and fight model. You fix the split and you fight about it later. And after your fight, you get yet another fixed split. So you got to keep going through this and going through this. It's a nightmare. And anybody who's been around the block at least once or twice realizes this is a big problem. Because if it's not fair, it won't be fun. So if it's fair, it'll be fun. And startups should at least be fun. They're a ton of work. Their chance of success is very slim. They should at least be fun. So the best way to understand this, I think, is a game of blackjack. Terry, do you know how to play blackjack?
I do. I wouldn't say I'm good at it because I take too many risks, but
Nobody's
I do
good at
play
it.
it.
So let's pretend that you and I are going to play blackjack together as a team. We're not playing against the dealer as individuals. We're playing as a team. And we agree to split the winnings 50-50 because we're friends. That sound fair? Sounds like a good deal. So fist pump.
Woohoo!
So we go to the table and we each put a chip on the same hand of blackjack. We don't know if we're going to win. We don't know how much we're going to win. We don't know how long it's going to take to win. The future is unknowable. Now we're confident, we're excited, it's fun to play blackjack, but we don't know what's going to happen. All we know for certain, though, is we each bet one chip. So the dealer deals an ace and another ace. This is a good hand. We're going to split the aces and double down. But I'm out of chips and you're not, so you put 2 more chips down. So now you bet 3 chips and I've only bet 1 chip. The future is still unknowable. We don't know if we're going to win or how much we're going to win or how long it's going to take to win. We can't tell the future. What we know for certain, though, is that you bet 3 and I bet 1. If we win, does our deal for 50-50 sound fair?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Just because we agreed to it doesn't make it fair. What's fair is that your share of the winnings should reflect your share of the bets. And you bet 3 times as much as I did, so you should have 75% of the winnings and I should have 25. That is a logical, obvious, unambiguous conclusion that your share of the winnings should reflect your share of the bets. Now, I had a deal for 50-50. I could sue you and probably win, but that doesn't make it fair. What's fair is that your share of the winnings should reflect your share of the bets. And that's exactly what Slicing Pie does. It observes bets and it allocates equity based on the bets, the relative value of each person's bet. Because startups are the same thing as blackjack, except you're betting on ideas instead of on cards. And you bet time and money and facilities and supplies and equipment. And the amount you're betting is always equal to the fair market value of the contribution. What's interesting about business, that's not like pretty much anything else in our lives, is that business is always quantifiable. Everything in business can be reduced to dollars and cents, literally everything. There's not a single thing you can do in business that's not quantifiable. Goodwill is quantifiable. People's salaries are quantifiable. Expenses are quantifiable. Airplane tickets are quantifiable. Market share is quantifiable. Everything is quantifiable. Because we know the values of things, the fair market values of things, we can do math to determine equity split. We don't have to negotiate it. I call it equity is not a negotiation, it's a calculation. So a person's share of the equity should be based on that person's share of the bets, and we can quantify the bets. So what Slicey Pie does is it keeps track of the bets, it observes the bets, it keeps track of who made which bets, and divides up equity based on that. So it's a very straightforward model. There's no ambiguity, there's no guessing, there's no predicting in the future. All it is observing bets. Now there's two pieces though. There's the first part is the allocation framework, which determines how we allocate shares across members based on their bets. And the second piece is the recovery framework. What happens when someone walks away from the company or quits the company? When someone leaves the company, we want to recover equity if possible. Now this animal is called a grunt. You may hear it referred to as a grunt fund sometimes, but it's all the same thing. It is a universal one-size-fits-all solution for the allocation and recovery of equity in early stage bootstrap startups. So whenever someone says your equity split depends, it doesn't depend on anything except for slicing pie. The only thing you can make rational changes with is slicing pie. So it works all over the world. The first thing I'll talk about today is the allocation framework, how we allocate equity among partners using this betting model. So in slicing pie, we use a unit called a slice. A slice is like a poker chip. It doesn't have any value to itself. It's just a marker to mark the fact that a bet took place. So it's a fictional unit of risk. So in slicing pie, you convert all your contributions to slices, and I'll show you the math in a minute. And at any given time, your share is equal to your slices divided by all the slices. Just like in blackjack, it was my chip divided by all the chips, 1 divided by 4, which is 25%. And it'll self-adjust over time. So as things change and unfold, as the saga continues, it'll continue to adjust to stay fair no matter what changes, no matter who makes choices, no matter how the market goes, no matter if you get another round of COVID, it always adapts perfectly. So there's two kinds of contributions you can make. The first kind is a non-cash contribution, which are things like someone's time, their ideas, their relationships, their certain facilities, things that don't require cash out of pocket to provide. I don't have to pay anybody to provide my time. I don't have to pay anybody to provide my ideas. I don't have to pay anybody to provide my relationships. They're non-cash contributions. A cash contribution does require cash out of my pocket. So if I buy a plane ticket for $1,000 and I'm not reimbursed, I'm betting $1,000. If I buy a pad of paper for 25 cents, I'm betting 25 cents. And some things are kind of in between. So for instance, if I buy a truck for the company, it's considered cash because I coughed up cash to buy it. If I already own the truck, it's considered non-cash because I didn't cough up cash to buy it. So some things are, the rule is, did it consume cash or not? So you take the fair market value of these contributions and you apply a multiplier. Multipliers recognize the difference between cash and non-cash. So in slicing pie, we give a 2x multiplier, 2 times slices for every dollar in non-cash. So every dollar in non-cash that I contribute, I'm contributing 2 slices to the pie. And cash is different. If I paid you $100 an hour to work for me, and you wanted to buy a thing that cost $100, it would take you more than an hour to earn enough money. Because when I give you the money, I pay employment taxes and social security taxes. When you receive the money, you pay income taxes. And when you buy the thing, you pay sales tax or VAT tax. So it may take you 2 hours to earn enough money. For that reason, I have to weigh cash heavier to smooth out the difference between non-cash and cash. So you actually get 4 slices per dollar for every dollar in cash you contribute. And this is based on a fairly extensive spreadsheet I built a few years ago with international tax rates and time value of money and interest rates and things like that. And on a global basis, it was about 50% discount on cash, which necessitates the doubling of cash. So non-cash, you get 2 slices, cash, you get 4 slices. So here's an example. To convert time, you take your fair market salary. Most people in this world work for companies and they get paid a salary and they don't get equity. They're perfectly happy with the salary they get. And they don't deserve equity because they're not taking any risk because they're getting paid. That's the fair market value. So if I'm willing to work for $150,000 to be the vice president of marketing somewhere, that's my fair market salary. If you pay me less than that, you're paying less than my fair market salary. If you pay me more than that, you're unnecessarily paying me more than that. So I'm only worth what I'm worth. So I subtract my cash compensation, because if you're paying me any kind of cash, it's not a bet. If you pay me my full salary, it's not a bet. If you pay me half my salary, the other half is a bet. So I multiply by 2 to get my grunt hourly resource rate, or GRR, which is the sound I make when I'm hard at work in my company. So for instance, $50 an hour is $100,000 a year annualized. Every hour I work for the company and I'm not paid, I'm betting 100 slices per hour. If the company can afford to pay me $10 an hour, then I'm only betting $40 at risk, and it means I'm contributing 80 slices. So the more you pay me, the less I'm betting, up until the point when you're paying me a full salary. I'm not making any bets at all. Cash, I take the amount of cash that's consumed and multiply it by 4. So I can invest $10,000 into the company. It's not a risk until the company spends the money, because I can just get the money back. It's basically in the savings account. So when the dollar is consumed either through expenses or investment that's consumed, then it converts to slices. Equipment. If I buy the equipment new for the company, it's considered cash because I'm consuming cash. If I own the equipment before joining the company, it's considered non-cash. If I own it more than a year, I use the book value as non-cash. So everything is quantifiable. Everything can be assigned to a fair market value. So some things are more abstract, like relationships. I have a big Rolodex. I'm, got a lot of friends, a lot of connections. Those are really important to the extent that I can convert them to revenue or investment. Ideas. People get really bunged up about their ideas. The idea is not that their idea is everything. Ideas are important. If you want to know how much your idea is worth, go out and try to license it to somebody else. Go out and try to sell it to somebody else. If somebody buys it, you'll know what the fair market value is. If no one buys it, it's either worthless or it's priceless. So you got to decide which one it is. It's probably worthless. Most of the time, execution is what matters. But if your idea is solidified and marketable, then it could be a royalty, or it could just be your job to have great ideas. I used to work for a fishing tackle box manufacturer. I was a VP of marketing. They paid me a salary, and it was my job to have good ideas. So you can go to Bass Pro Shop today and see the ideas that I had in execution and then making money, but I don't get a royalty because it was my job to have good ideas. If I invented those outside the company, I might have licensed them to the company. And unreimbursed expenses, if I buy plane tickets or office supplies or computers, it's unreimbursed expenses, which is cash. So here we are at ShiftCo, a bunch of grunts milling around. This one's got an idea. She brings her team together. She's got her junior developer who's going to build websites and apps. The founder, which is her, she's going to bring ideas and time. And her rich uncle is going to bankroll the thing and make some important introductions. All these things can be quantified, and therefore they can be converted to slices. You simply keep track of the total number of slices and divide each person's share by the total slices. So there's number 1, 2, and 3. Now, at this point in time, if the company is to reach a break-even point or a Series A investment, if they're to terminate, this would be the fair equity split. This reflects the relative value of each person's bets going into this moment in time. So it is perfectly adjusted to reflect the amount of risk each person took to make the company a success. Now let's add somebody. This is Barry. He's a sales guy. He's got a big Rolodex. He's going to bring time and relationships. All we got to do is convert his stuff to slices like everybody else's and add them to the total. And now we recalculate everyone's shares based on the new total. Now we're going to assume for a moment no one else did any work this period, but in reality, they had more slices for every period. So here's number 1, 2, 3, and 4. And now the split looks like this. Now Barry's got 13%. It makes sense that he would have 13% given the relative value of his contributions, his bets. If the rich uncle was unwilling to budge on his equity split, he wanted to be fixed, then the founder and the junior developer would have to figure out how to give him shares out of their split, and they would have fought about it. And maybe the salesperson would decide not to join the company after all. So because this is dynamic, because it's adjusting properly, it simply adjusts to match what's going on. Now, sometimes people leave a company, and leaving a company is where things start really getting ugly. It's because people want to keep their equity. They want to, get paid out. For instance, there's nothing more heartbreaking to me to see an early founder pay out a departing founder and then go out of business. So the only person that ever makes any money is the person who pooped out in the beginning and quit the company. I see this time and time again. It's tragic. The money should be spent on marketing and product development and market development, not paying off ex-employees. So think about 4 reasons why someone could leave a company. The first reason is in box A. They can be fired for good reason. Being fired for good reason implies that you did something that's so negligent that being fired is the only option, like embezzlement or sexual harassment or bringing a gun to work. Those things are obviously clear and threats to the company, and you should be fired. But more likely, being fired for good reason is performance-based. You weren't doing your job properly. You weren't performing. And that means you got a warning, fired. A warning is a discussion you have with an employee saying, you're not living up to expectations. What does the company need to provide? What reasonable accommodations can we make to help you do your job? So for instance, I need a faster laptop. That's reasonable. We can provide a faster laptop. I need a flexible work schedule. That's reasonable. We can provide a flexible work schedule. I need a all expense paid trip to Las Vegas every week. That's not reasonable. We can't make that extra. We can't make the accommodations. It's a discussion about what kinds of reasonable accommodations you can make so someone could do their job. That's a warning one. If they have those accommodations and they still can't do their job, that's warning number two, which is a similar discussion. Third time you're fired. You've got to give someone the opportunity to change their behavior and give them the resources they need to perform. If I don't do that as an employer, it's not really fair. In fact, if I don't give them warnings, it's considered fired for no good reason, which is box B. And I can certainly do that as an employer. I can certainly fire someone for no good reason. I can fire them whenever I want. I can just walk in one day and say, you're fired. Might be a bummer for everybody, but I can certainly do that. But if I give you a warning or you're completely negligent, then that's considered fired for good reason. If I don't give you a warning, it's considered fired for no good reason. You can also resign for good reason. When someone resigns for good reason, that implies the company made promises that it couldn't keep or didn't keep. So I might say, we're going to reach break even in 6 months and we'll get a full salary. And 6 months comes around and there's no salaries, you now have good reason to resign. Or our products will be ready for sale in 3 months. The product is not ready in 3 months. I have good reason to resign. Or we're based in Seattle, we're moving to New York, pack your bags, get your kids in the car. That's all you signed up for. That's good reason to resign. Or you were our VP of marketing, now you're going to clean toilets. Not what you signed up for. Good reason to resign. So startups are notorious for making promises they can't keep. So startup founders need to be very careful about making promises they can't keep, so they don't give people a good reason to resign. So I don't want people to mislead you into thinking this company is going to be more successful than it's going to be. So I got to be careful as an employer. And the last reason is I can resign for no good reason, meaning I'm using my own reasons to resign. I don't like your vision anymore. I don't like you anymore. I don't like the company anymore. I don't believe in the company. I got a better job somewhere else. I'm leaving for my own reasons. So in situations A and D, the employee is making decisions about their own behavior that negatively impact the future of the business. They're essentially walking away from their bet. So what happens is they lose their slices for non-cash contributions and they lose their multiplier for cash contributions, which means they get paid back the cash later on before profits are paid out, which means it's painful to leave under these circumstances, as it should be. If you want to play this game and get benefit from the upside, don't get fired, don't quit. We want people to stick with the company through to make it a going concern. On the flip side, if you resign for good reason or you're fired for no good reason, you keep your slices on. Your bet stays on the table and it will convert to equity go after everyone else converts. So it's painful for a company to lose someone under these circumstances, as it should be. If I want not to have outstanding equity to a non-player, I shouldn't fire them. I shouldn't give them reason to quit. So what happens is everyone's consequences are aligned with the benefit of the company in a fair, logical model. So here we are again, back at our team. We find that a junior developer is not doing her job. She couldn't design a WordPress site because she didn't have the right software. We gave her the right software. She still didn't perform her job a couple of weeks later. So third time we gave her a warning, she's fired. Now all she did is contribute non-cash contributions. So we're simply taking her stuff out of the pie and we're going to redivide everyone's share at that point. So now the pie is readjusted based on the departure of this employee who's no longer contributing. So everyone has a slightly bigger share, but they're not necessarily better off because they got to find a new developer. But at this point in time, based on the circumstances of the group, a decision was made and the pie automatically, logically, unambiguously readjusted to accommodate the remaining shareholders. Now, eventually, you're going to want to bake the pie. And baking the pie means it turns a crisp golden brown and tastes delicious. And baking the pie means terminating the use of slicing pie. And it happens at 2 points. At break even, when the company becomes self-sustaining, or Series A, meaning you raise enough money to fully fund your operations. So here's how this would work in practice. So let's say you're worth $100,000 a year, and I pay you $0 an hour. I'm paying you zero part of your salary. That means every hour you work and you're not compensated, you're betting 100 slices. Now the company is generating some revenue. I can use part of that revenue to pay my expenses and part of that revenue to pay your salary, but I can only pay part of your salary. But because I'm paying part of your salary, your ongoing risk is reduced. And the more of your salary I pay, the less your risk is on a go-forward basis. So as I pay $20 an hour, $30 an hour, my slices per hour go down, all the way to the point where now I'm paying your full salary on a go-forward basis, and you're not making any more bets. At that point, the pie stops accumulating slices and naturally stops changing because everyone's getting paid. There's no more bets being placed. And now after our expenses are being met and our salaries are being met, we have profits left over. and I have two choices with the profits. I can keep the profits as retained earnings, or I can distribute the profits to my shareholders as dividends. And slicing pie determines the distribution of those profits or the proceeds of a sale if you sell the company. This is the bet paying off. This is our 75-25 split in blackjack. This is the payoff of the bet. This is the participation in the upside in the success of the business based on your bets. The other scenario would be if you raise Series A investment. Series A investment is bigger than an angel round, means you're fully funding your operation. So let's say in this example, I negotiated a $900,000 pre-money valuation and I raised $1 million. Well, I'm basically having a post-money valuation of $1.9 million, which means I sold 53% of the business. I use that money to pay my expenses and pay my salaries, so no more bets are being placed by anybody else. And now when the proceeds, the profits come in, I had to split it with the Series A investor. So what slicing pie produces then is a perfectly fair model that rewards the actual contributions. Now people say they're not their promises, what they actually do. We're providing ongoing motivation to participate and continue participating. We're accommodating team changes. I showed you how to add and subtract somebody. We're flexible in the face of rapid change. At no point did I just stop operations, call my lawyer, have them redraft the documents. It just keeps changing automatically. And it's gotten rid of the gators. No one's being taken advantage of, and I'm not taking advantage of anybody. It always works, no matter what kind of business you are, no matter where you are in the world. Now, if you are thinking about slicing pie and you don't want to use it, or someone you talk to about it doesn't want to use it, there's likely one of three reasons they don't want to use it. The first reason is that he or she doesn't get it. So you've maybe heard this talk today and you're still having a hard time getting your head around it. If you don't get it, there's plenty of slicing pie resources online, including at ShiftCo. There's books that I've written. My newest one is Will Work for Pie. The book's been translated into a dozen different languages. There's software online. There's resources. There's even a slicing pie game. You can contact me, do a call with me. I'm spending a lot of my time educating the world on how this works. The second reason someone wouldn't want to use slicing pie is they're not willing to learn the model. They've been exposed to it. They're like, this is do it the old way. This is do 50-50. It's easier for me. I just roll my 5% because I'm an advisor. If they're not willing to learn it, it's a good idea to back off that person, in my opinion, because they're probably not going to be very productive or willing to learn new things. And the third reason is they do get it, but it's their intention to take advantage of you. And this happens a lot when entrepreneurs are desperate, they were trying to raise money, and the angel investor says, I'm only giving you 50 grand, but I want 10% just because. And you see this on Shark Tank and all kinds of, that people are giving small amounts of money in exchange for fixed equity splits, or small amounts of work in exchange for fixed equity splits. That means it's their intention to get more than they deserve. It's nice to know in advance what you're going to get. It feels warm and fuzzy to know what percentage you're going to get. The problem is, no matter what percentage I get, it's going to be the wrong percentage. It's either going to be too high or too low. With slicing pie, you don't know what you're going to get in advance. The good news is, no matter what you get at the end, it's going to be exactly the fair number. So, like I say, slicing pie is used all over the world, and it never fails to produce a fair split. And that's my story, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about how it works.
All right, so a couple of things I want to say before we take some questions, and I'd love for you to queue up your questions. Yeah, everything that Mike just said, I 100,000 millionth agree with. Secondly, what I love about his methodology is it forces you to think through those rules as the business changes. And then what it does is it dynamically adjusts as the business changes. And I don't care how well thought out your plan is, the proof is truly in how you handle as those things changes. And as those things change, and we experienced that as things changed, the pie recalculated. It literally made adjustments, when things didn't work the way that we thought, or somebody decided they wanted to leave, the rules were well thought out. So I just want to, reiterate a lot of the things that he said. And then the other thing is, when you get to the break even point, at that point, you can lock it down, the pie freezes, and you distribute the pie slices and they turn into shares. That worked exactly the way that he said as well. So just kind of want to crystallize a couple of those things, because the hard part is thinking through, what are the salaries for the roles, and what is considered a good reason and a not good reason. Those things really do have to be thought through. But to be honest, you need to be thinking through those as well. Who has a question for Mike? Let me check the chat here. Any thoughts on fractional shares using digital asset tokens? That's a great question. And then also safe notes as a way to value the company. So those two questions, Mike, thoughts about fractional shares using NFTs, and then also safe notes as a way to value the company in the future.
Thanks. Yeah, there's been a lot of chatter over the years about blockchain and NFTs, and people in their heads when they think slice, they think, how can I tokenize this? How can I've kicked the tires on that for a number of times, and there's been some people who've built slicing pie software on the blockchain, and all they've produced is a slow piece of software. Slicing pie is a moral agreement, and it's about cooperation. It's about sharing the company at the get-go. It's not necessary to make it sort of locked in the way that Bitcoin and NFTs can do. So it doesn't lend itself really well to that application because it's not necessarily necessary at that point. Now, there's no reason you can't issue your shares in NFTs or on blockchain, but the slices themselves don't need to be put into blockchain. There are people that use my software that have 100 users plus. I don't know how they're doing that, but they have lots of people in slices that are adequate for them. That doesn't mean there's not an opportunity there. It doesn't mean I'm not kicking the tires on it. It just means that in the short term, I haven't seen a lot of value in putting slicing pie on the blockchain or using slices as a token, for instance. I hope that answers your question.
And then what about safe note? Do you like safe notes as a way to value the company in the future?
So think about three kinds of investors. There are people who take immediate risk in salary and expenses. They're called grunts, and they're participants in the slicing pie model, and they're your co-founders and your partners. There are people who invest their own money in amounts that are too small to fully fund your operation. They're called mom, dad, usually called angel investors or friends or family. And they should get a safe note. The safe note should avoid setting a valuation. When you set a valuation for your firm, you introduce a whole bunch of different problems. The first problem is that when you issue new shares, you might incur taxes on them. The second problem is you've given yourself a finite resource when you set a valuation, where slices are unlimited, valuations are limited. The third problem is people are going to disagree with it because it's ambiguous and subjective. The third problem is people are going to argue about it. So there's all kinds of problems. So at an angel round, you shouldn't be setting a valuation. By safe note, we'll convert to equity at a later date based on the valuation terms of the professional round, the VC round. And that's the third type of investor. A venture capitalist is somebody who invests other people's money in amounts that are large enough to fund your operation based on terms, negotiated terms. That will convert to safe notes, that will convert to convertible notes, and that's the way that should be handled. Once you do your VC round, you should have enough money to pay salaries and pay expenses, so there's no more individual risk being taken. If there is excessive individual risk being taken, it means you didn't probably do a very good round, or you may have to take a haircut on your salary. So think about it in terms of three different types of investors: grunts who are participating in the pie, angel investors who get safes or convertible notes, and VCs who get a priced round and will price your round and subsequently restrict your shares going forward, wherever terms are subject to. So that's a good question. I haven't seen anybody who has not invested because of slicing pie. In fact, with your investors, slicing pie is non-issue. All they want to see is a clean, conflict-free cap table, which is exactly what slicing pie delivers.
Excellent. Any other questions for Mike?
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Hi.
Just a couple of questions here. So just to make sure I follow the thinking around the safe note, I think it's so the alternate to slicing pie, is exactly what you said, right? The family and friends round and the safe round, which is usually the pre-seed. So this is still pre-product market fit. It's still an idea, really, but you need to form the company to make the expenses, etc., to keep going, and then you get to the the VC round, whether you call it seed or pre-seed or angel, it doesn't matter. But at that point, they're basically funding the company to operate a certain point in time. What has been the VC reaction, feedback to the slicing pie? And are there a set of investors that you and slicing pie kind of have as friends of slicing pie model?
So I've never heard a negative reaction from VCs for slicing pie. It's really the VC round. Slicing pie is not really part of the discussion because you're negotiating a price for your shares and you're presenting a cap table that's based on slicing pie, but it won't change after the VC round, just based on slicing pie. So I don't spend a lot of time with VCs at that point because it's way past the point of when they use slicing pie. I don't have slicing pie friendly investors because this slicing pie is not really an investment tool. It's a division tool for co-founders. I'd like to. I know there's a fund in Europe being formed just to invest in slicing pie companies. That's being formed right now. So the company is forming an investment fund based on slicing pie. I know there are incubators that use a slicing pie model, like Terry, for instance, that use slicing pie model. But I don't maintain a database. I historically in my career that's not been my focus, is raising money. I've been really early stage bootstrap stage guy. So there's some people who's focused on raising money more than I have. So.
And I want to comment on that, Mike, because I believe one of the things that is off in the investment and in that space is that it allows companies to not think like a bootstrap business because they've got all this capital sitting in the bank. And that's how the investors win, is you burn through the capital. And then if they choose to re-up, their valuation basically works in their favor, and they take more and more of the company, and you end up without the company, as opposed to really thinking through a bootstrap business. Although you may get there slower, you're going to get there in a more methodical way, in a more structured way, and you're going to keep more of your business. So that would be the counter to that of why I think slicing pie solves a lot of those issues. Is the founder who has the ideas, who put the blood, sweat, and tears in, keeps more of the business because you bootstrapped and you did so in a disciplined way. And then when you get to Series A and you can fund operations, you now you're receiving capital to grow it, which is a much better place to be in terms of keeping more of what you built.
Right. Funding can make you pretty stupid sometimes.
Yeah.
And with slicing pie, everyone has an incentive to freeze the pie as soon as possible. So the focus on getting to revenue and getting to break even is laser focused. If I have a fixed split, it doesn't matter what I do or how I act. I'm gonna have my fixed chunks, and my incentives aren't necessarily aligned. One thing that slicing pie does for you is it allows you to run your company as if you were funded, setting fair market values. People aren't gonna work for free forever. I want to know how much you're gonna want when I start paying you, how much you're gonna want. I see people all the time is they have a fixed split, and then the money comes in, and I expect to be paid $200,000. Well, you thought I was worth $50,000. So I thought I was worth, having that discussion up front and setting fair market values up front would be much more useful. So having, and also help how much money you need to raise. So going into your first round, you'll be much better prepared. You'll be further along, hopefully. You'll have much better understanding of your metrics. You'll have a much due diligence is a snap of slicing pie because you have records of everything people did. So going into that is much better. I think you're in a much healthier position going into an investment round. That's anecdotal. I can't prove that, but I think going into a slicing pie company, going into an A round is a much better position than a fixed split company.
Awesome. We have time for one more question. Anybody else have another question?
I can ask one if nobody asking.
Go for it.
I actually have two more, but that's okay. I'll ask one question, which is there a slicing pie tool that you have, like an Excel spreadsheet based or something, which keeps the records of how this model works for the company?
Yes, thank you for asking. There is an Excel spreadsheet that you can download for free off my blog, slicingpie.com. And there's also software you can sign up your co-founders. They can keep track of their own contributions. And it's widely used, and I developed it because people kept saying, "I see your spreadsheet, but you should have a SaaS tool." So I launched a SaaS tool a few years ago, and it's got.
I highly recommend the SaaS tool. It's outstanding.
Much easier.
Yeah, it's outstanding. It's very helpful. It's very transparent. Everybody can see where they are. So I highly recommend that.
Gives you great reports for due diligence. You just print out, here's everything that happened in this company. Here's who did what, how much time they spent on it, how much they all get paid, that kind of stuff. You have a second question you want to ask that one too?
Yeah, sure. So just to make, so you mentioned that these ideally the safe, you know, the kind of the angel round or the friends and family round, if you're using a safe note or a convertible note. I'm assuming safe and convertible kind of are both okay with the slicing model. But you said something about try not to have a cap on the safe or convertible note. Can you tell us why you think that's not a good idea?
It's okay. There's a lot of concerns I have about both those tools, but I haven't spent the time to distill those concerns down to paper. And you know, it just, they may or may not be fair to. It doesn't reflect reality. But what a safe note does, what a convertible note does, in my mind, is the same thing. It says we don't have the wherewithal or the motivation or the desire to set a valuation for our company. I can't go to my mom and tell her what my valuation is. I can't go to you. Having an amateur investor, which an angel is basically an amateur investor, even they invest a lot, and having a founder discuss and negotiate a valuation is not a good thing to do. It's too subjective. Having a professional investor, professional VC, is a VC group, they're much more qualified to set a valuation than an angel group or an angel investor and a founder. So what a safe note does and what a convertible note does is it recognizes that phenomenon and says, here's a quick way to get your money into the bank without going through all this rigmarole of setting up a private placement memorandum and a formal agreement. By setting a cap, you're saying we're not going to set a valuation, but we kind of are setting a valuation. So it's sort of this dual thing. We're going to throw a dart at $5 million, and that kind of seems it's a prediction of the future. So to me, it's not very productive. And it says we're going to give someone a windfall reward if you go off the chart. So windfalls are just luck. And I want people to be rewarded for their time and their hard experience and the windfall. So I want the hard work and experience and contributions reflected plus the luck. But if I just lock in my winnings by setting a cap, then I'm overly benefiting from luck. So I want to be careful with that. Luck is great. Luck is an important ingredient, but you shouldn't just benefit from luck. And that's what the convertible notes feel like to me when they have a cap on them. But whether you use a safe or there's a thing called KISS, keep it simple security, or there's a new one called a CAFE, continuous agreement for future equity. There's all kinds of flavors of that. Anything that avoids the valuation, allows the money to get in quickly, I'm generally in support of. But you got to be careful with those tools.
Excellent. Well, thanks everybody. And for those of you that are listening after the session on the replay, feel free to check out Mike's work at slicingpie.com. If you're a Shiftco member, he has a course online that walks you through it. And there's also a free copy of his book, a Shiftco branded version of his book, which we highly recommend as well. So Mike, it's an honor to support your work. And thank you so much for being a master teacher on our platform. Thank you for inventing this methodology. It has made my life more simple to invest and work towards things that make the world better. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.